Today I discussed the black sheep of the Dark Souls trilogy, Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin. Dark Souls 2 has grabbed much hate from many players for good reasons. It's my most played Souls game, also for good reasons. I may be rookie numbers at only a couple hundred hours, but I still have some knowledge that I could pass on the matter. Dark Souls 2 is an amazing game, but I understand the hate that it gets. However, I think the amount of hate is unjustified and unfair to the game. The other Souls games also have their problems, like Dark Souls 3 being the longest hallway known to man, Dark Souls 1 being rushed towards the end, especially in Lost Izalith and Demon Ruins. I'm not saying that Dark Souls 2 doesn't have any problems. To start off, let me list off some of the major problems Dark Souls 2 has. Let me first state the obvious. The game was not made by Miyazaki. He merely supervised the game because at the time he was working on Bloodborne. He also wanted to see the creativity of two directors, Tomohiro Shibuya and Yui Tanemura. Apologies if I butchered those names. While people were unhappy about this, Miyazaki gave high praise for the game. On top of that, Miyazaki basically said, Dark Souls 2 walked so Elden Ring could run. It's even shown in Elden Ring with some of the game mechanics I discuss later in this video. Now there's a funny little stat called adaptability that gives you a love-hate relationship, but I'll focus on the hate for now. Leveling up this stat increases your agility, which in turn increases the amount of invincibility frames your character has when doing certain actions, rolling or backstepping. At first glance, this sounds good, and we'll touch up on why it's good later. Your character will start with far less iframes than either of the Dark Souls games. Well, how many frames do you get in the other ones? Dark Souls 1 has 11 frames, or 13 if you have the Darkwood Grain Ring equipped. Dark Souls 3 has 13 frames, or 16 with the Karthus Blood Ring equipped. While it doesn't sound like much, it matters. Bandit in Dark Souls 2 has the lowest adaptability and lowest attunement. Attunement also modifies the agility stat, but not by much, giving the class 7 iframes. At the beginning of the game, you have to be almost perfect to roll out of danger. Now there are a lot of enemies in Dark Souls 2, and I mean a lot. You will get ganked by enemies often. It's the difficulty increase they came up with when making Scholar of the First Sin. Many moments in the game are the devs saying, gotcha, as you get shanked by 3 hollows surrounded by 2 archers who constantly shoot arrows with extreme accuracy. I like the accuracy though, making them less of a fodder enemy than the other games. Iron Keep comes to mind, where many of the Alone Knights have amazing detection range and start swarming you. It actually makes you play carefully. Some areas of the game just look horrible, like the Shaded Woods. The main reason I can see is because of the lack of lighting. With sunlight, the areas look amazing. I'll talk more about those when we could talk about the positives. Some of these areas just look flat or smudged. I'll have to try out a lighting engine mod and see if it fixes some of these areas. One final thing to talk about is soul memory. It's a number that increases every time you gain souls. This number never goes down, meaning once it's high, it stays high. Why is this bad? Your ability to summon friends is tied to your soul memory. If one of you is out of range, then you're out of luck. Worst part is that it ties to invasions. Say if you had 100k souls, then you died twice, you lost those 100k souls, but your soul memory doesn't change. You'll be invaded by much stronger players at that memory. Let's start off the good by talking about its distant connection with the lore of Dark Souls 1. While Dark Souls 1 focuses on the gods and linking the flame, Dark Souls 2 focuses on humans dealing with the undead curse. Dark Souls 2 takes place in a far distant future where most, if not all, the people in Dark Souls are forgotten to time. It makes it unique in a way. For example, some of the Lord's souls reappear telling you that they will persist even after death. The 4 queens, Nashandra, Alsana, Nadalia, and Alana, are fragments of Manus. It keeps the idea of Dark Souls, while doing their own thing instead of just blatantly showing you things from Dark Souls 1 like Dark Souls 3 does. Let's go back to adaptability. Good stuff comes from it. Not only does it raise your agility, giving you more iframes, it also boosts your resistances to bleeding, poison, curse, and petrify. Not only that, it increases your poise and poison bonus on weapons. It's actually pretty good to level up. If you invest in it heavily, you can even get higher iframes than both Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3 at their maximums. I will admit, it takes 99 in the stat. In my opinion, it's not needed. A mere 20 in the stat gives you enough to have equal iframes to Dark Souls 1. You could also be a maniac and stick with the low iframes. One last thing to mention, agility also increases the speed of using consumables and even blocking. Now I understand it's a game and we don't look for realism, but you have to respect those stances in Dark Souls 2. Instead of keeping the same style as Dark Souls 1, they opted for real-world weapon stances. The straight sword, my favorite weapon in the series, looks and feels amazing to hold. I actually wish they kept up with this idea in the games that came out after. This game introduced 8 directions for locked-on rolling. This doubled Dark Souls 1's rolling system. It gave you much more control when moving around enemies. Having those diagonal directions really made a difference in feeling. I can hardly go back to Dark Souls 1. Being locked to 4 directions is painful and hard to manage. It's even to the point where it feels unplayable. Now for something amazing, power stancing. Being able to put a weapon in each hand and unlock a whole new moveset is awesome. It was so awesome they brought it back in Elden Ring. If you get the Bone Fist, an Asasis, or an unarmed hand, you can unlock some cool karate moves. You can even get a Hadouken. My favorite weapons to power stance are 2 Smelter Swords. It's fun to bonk enemies with 2 big weapons and explode. Let's keep going on with the weapons for this next point. The game has a diverse amount of parry and backstab animations. These animations are tied to which weapon you're using. Not to mention, many of the weapons can parry without a shield. Some obviously unreliable, but still doable. Now let me talk about Tic Tacs, aka life gems. Having something other than Estus Flask for healing is nice. They even have different variations that provide better healing. Popping one of these while poisoned basically negates the effect. Sure, the other games have extra healing items. None of them do it exactly like life gems do. You could pop a couple life gems and continually take a beating as long as you don't reach full HP. Dark Souls 2 does something different when going into New Game Plus. While the other games don't change anything other than the damage and health of enemies, Dark Souls 2 adds new enemies into the mix. It gives you a newer experience with the New Game cycles. On top of that, Dark Souls 2 introduced a new way of getting into a New Game Plus area. Bonfire Ascetics. If you wanted an item that was specific in the New Game Plus, you would pop one of these at the bonfire, increasing that specific area to an instance of New Game Plus. These next points go hand in hand. Dark Souls 2 has some of, if not the best, PvP in the series. You don't have as much poise as Dark Souls 1, but you also don't have it as useless as Dark Souls 3. They have a literal covenant that takes you to an arena to battle other players. Mindlessly rolling also costs you, so you have to be careful. This game also offers a large build variety, giving you more options to take into PvP, and they are viable. I would say it would be the best, but like I said earlier, Soul Memory exists. Let's take a look at some of the amazing visuals that are shown in the game. Not every area looks bad. Look at Majula and take in its beauty. The soundtrack alone stays in your head. The lighting is beautiful and it competes with modern games. Look at Heights Tower. If only they took the time to do the lighting in all of the areas. If they gave me another remaster, I'll play for another 1,000 hours. The DLCs for the game are perfect. To my understanding, the original director was replaced with the final director when it was going through a rough development patch. This shows that the DLCs feel complete instead of a jumbled mess. They also contain some of the best boss fights in the game. I'll admit, it also contains the boss that has my second most death in the series, Sin the Slumbering Dragon. The first boss that has most of my deaths in the series is Gravity. Whether it be the heat or the furnace from Broom Tower, the harsh cold of Alum Lois, the dark areas of Shulva, you'll be hooked. I like all 3 of these DLCs over the DLCs in the other games except the Ring City. That fight with Slave Knight Gale was awesome. Now, hopefully that's enough to explain why Peak Souls 2 is a peak game. There's probably a lot more that I can go off on, but these are the main things that come to mind on the topic. Just talking about it makes me want to get all the achievements in a playthrough. Hopefully you feel the same way. This is Toby. I can say we've completed this quest.